Good Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining us. So here's a question. If you work in the corporate world, or rather a statement, you're more than familiar with mandatory corporate trainings. They often cover a range of issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, back in 2020, one Department of Human Services employee said some of those trainings just didn't sit right with him, and eventually his complaint led to a lawsuit. Lou Raguse is on the show to explain.
Jana, the conservative nonprofit firm, the Upper Midwest Law Center, represented the state employee. They said the state agreed to pay $10,000 to the plaintiff and $5,000 to the law firm as a settlement to end the legal dispute. They see that as a victory, but an attorney from the nonprofit Gender Justice says the ruling actually supports that mandatory training.
Aaron Norgren, a security officer at the Minnesota Sex Offender Program in St. Peter, was required in 2020, like all Department of Human Services employees, to watch several training videos, including one titled How to Be Anti-Racist, which included a full minute of silence for the murder of George Floyd, and centered on the teachings of Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. Norgren opposed that, as well as another training video called Understanding Gender Identity and Expression, Moving Beyond the Binary, which DHS says aimed to educate employees on the experiences of transgender and non-binary employees and clients. Attorney Doug Seaton explains Norgren's opposition to that training.
What Aaron objected to was the fact that he was being asked to affirm and essentially endorse views of human gender and sexuality that were antithetical to his Christian faith. That was the core problem he saw here.
Norgren filed a complaint. Then, after he didn't receive an interview for a promotion, he filed a lawsuit claiming religious discrimination and retaliation based on his prior opposition to the training topics. DHS claimed Norgren did not meet the job's qualifications. A federal district judge initially dismissed the lawsuit, but a court of appeals revived it and ruled Norgren made enough of a case regarding retaliation that it could proceed. Before a trial or judgment occurred, the state agreed to settle, paying a total of $15,000. which Norgren and his attorney consider a victory.
It's a good outcome for him. It's a good outcome for Minnesotans because we now have the state on notice that they can't simply cavalierly override objections that employees have raised to what they believe to be anti-family, anti-Christian, anti-American so-called training being imposed on them unrelated to their jobs.
It's going to be less expensive for the state to resolve the claim than it would be for the state to litigate the claim.
Attorney Christy Hall from the nonprofit Gender Justice says the most important takeaway to anyone who supports those types of training in the workplace is that the Court of Appeals found no First Amendment issues with the training material itself or with making the training mandatory.
There's certainly nothing in the resolution of this lawsuit or in the Eighth Circuit's decision from earlier that forbids the state from doing that or even discourages the state from doing that.
Norgren did not lose his job, but he no longer is a state employee. Now, we had questions for the state, such as why did they decide to settle and whether they still require the same training. But we did not receive a response from the Department of Human Services all day today, Jana.
Yeah, it certainly, begs a bigger conversation to hear, why not fight something if the Department of Human Services believes these trainings are what should be done in 2024, but they just wouldn't talk to you?
They did not respond. They didn't provide a statement or anything like that. I think that you could infer that what attorney for Gender Justice said is that $15,000 is probably cheaper than taking something all the way to trial. So you might infer that that might be their response as to why they would settle.
Yeah, thanks so much. We appreciate it, Lou.